Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together.
Most people, when they focus on weight loss, they focus on a tiny percentage of the metabolism that actually burns fat during exercise, and that burns fat through a caloric deficit. So that's what 90% of people focus on when we're focused on fat loss. But when we actually break down the metabolism, so our BMR is our basal metabolic rate, and that is basically our metabolism at rest. And this makes up somewhere between 60 through 70% of all calories burned are burned by our BMR. So our BMR takes care of things like our organ function, our brain's function, just our natural metabolic processes that keep us alive on a day-to-day basis. Now, NEAT is non-exercise based thermogenesis. So non-exercise or activity-based thermogenesis. So this is anything that you're doing throughout the day that's creating any type of movement and any type of caloric expenditure outside of exercise. So things like moving my hands, talking, gesticulating. This is your NEAT burned calories. And these make up about a 10 to 15% of your daily caloric expenditure. And then you have TEF, so food's thermic effect. So this is the thermic effect of food, and this is higher with some foods than it is with others, but this makes up about 10% of calories burned on a day-to-day basis. And this is just the thermic effect. This is the cost and the energy that has to be expended to digest any type of food that you're eating. And then finally, we have EAT, which is exercise-based thermogenesis. And this makes up a tiny 5 to 10% of calories burned happen during exercise. So this is exercise, this is food digestion, this is non-exercise thermogenesis. So this is just your day-to-day movements, moving your hands, things like that. But if you look, the vast majority of our calories are burned by our BMR. So they're burned at rest. And this becomes super important because what happens is everybody else is focused on this tiny percentage of calories that comes from exercise, that comes from a caloric deficit, that comes from everything else that accumulates and causes us to burn calories, when that's a tiny percent compared to 70% is burned by our basal metabolic rate. So the problem with this is that when we focus on these other things here, what happens is we'll go into a massive caloric deficit. We'll start doing a ton of cardio every day. And what will actually happen is our BMR will start to lower and lower and lower. So if you watch a graph, when somebody's been in a deficit for a long time, they'll start up here. And let's say their BMR, say they're a 200-pound guy, their BMR is maybe, let's just round it off at 2,000 calories. And then after they've been dieting for the course of months, this number is progressively going down and down and down and down. And what's happening is your body is adapting to being in that caloric deficit. It's reducing your BMR. It's reducing your daily caloric need. And after a few months, you're at maybe 1,600 calories. And this is just an example, but this is what happens during a caloric deficit in a diet. So now to burn the same amount of calories that you used to at 2,000 calories, so if you wanted to be in a 500 calorie deficit at 2,000 calories, it would be 500 off of that. But now it's down to 1,600, so now you have to be down at 1,100 calories to get the same effect. And so this is usually the process, the snowball effect that people have problems with, is they just keep lowering the calories, increasing the caloric expenditure, increasing the cardio. And then it crashes your hormones. It burns out your thyroid. It drops your testosterone down. And all of these are anabolic hormones that are naturally will burn fat and build muscle. So what also happens is now we're not eating enough calories, right? So now we're starting to lose muscle. We're starting to lose lean muscle tissue. And we're not really losing fat anymore because our body's adapted to that. So what I like to focus on is a system called metabolic priming. So we want to exaggerate the BMR. We want our BMR, since that's where the vast majority of our calories burned, we want that to be as high as possible. Now, how do we raise our BMR? There's a couple different ways to do it. Number one, if somebody's been dieting for a super long time and they've been under eating for a super long time, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to reverse diet them. So rather than put them in a caloric deficit and have them going downwards, we're going to put them in a small caloric surplus and have them going upwards. And how we'll actually do it is we'll grade it up. So we won't just go from like 1,600 to 2K, right? Because then they'll start to gain a bunch of fat, but we want to taper their metabolism up. So we'll go 1,700 calories, 1,800 calories, 1,900 calories, 2,000 calories. Get them back up to work up to their maintenance calories, what their maintenance calories should be at their body weight and should be at their natural mass. And then we want to coast on that for about 6 to 8 weeks and just let the metabolism restabilize itself. Let the thyroid hormones, let the thyroid recover, let all the hormones recover. And then once we have the BMR up and their maintenance calories are higher, so now if their BMR is 2,000 calories and their maintenance calories are maybe 2,400 or 2,500 calories, then we can easily put them at 2,200 calories and still be in a good 250 calorie deficit, 300 calorie deficit, lose a lot of fat because the metabolism, the engine's running really fast, but we can also build muscle because we're not having to starve them in this process. So that's the system of metabolic priming. What's cool about this is that it gives us the ability to eat more food and lose more weight and get better overall body composition changes, because ultimately that's what we want. We don't just want to lose weight, right? We want to lose specifically body fat and we want to build muscle. That's the physique that men, women, everybody wants. They think they just want to lose fat, and that is true in the beginning. You do need to lose your fat. But what they really want is they want to lose fat and they want to build muscle. So metabolic priming gives us the ability to do that without having to starve you, so that you can eat more, food, and still lose weight. So another important component to metabolic priming is that we are going to want to build muscle. So muscle is thermogenically active, right? Meaning that it requires a lot of calories to sustain it. So 1 pound of muscle requires 8 calories a day to sustain it, whereas 1 pound of fat requires less than 2. So you can see exponentially how having more muscle on your frame is going to give you a higher basal metabolic rate. It's going to give you a higher just overall caloric demand on a daily basis. So you're going to burn more fat throughout the day naturally. You're going to burn more calories throughout the day naturally. So we want to build up the muscle because that's going to raise this up, give us the ability to eat more calories, give us the physique we want, while also still burning fat. So the best way, and I'll kind of close on this because I've covered everything, the best way that I can describe this whole process of metabolic priming, which is integral to the primal method. This is absolutely something I use on every one of my clients. When they come in, the first month is basically an assessment, and it's watching their metabolism. It's seeing how their metabolism operates, right? I want to know if their metabolism's running great and they've been like overeating, or they've been eating a reasonable amount of food and their metabolism's running fast and everything's smooth, then from right there, we'll just skip the whole priming process and we'll put them in a deficit and we'll lose weight. But another key component to this is duration of diet and diet fatigue. The longer that you spend in a diet, the more this process, this slowing down of the metabolism process is going to happen. So we want to do our diets in relatively shorter bursts. For me, a really sweet spot is somewhere in like the 12 to 16 week range when you're using a small deficit. So when you're using a 2 through 300 calorie deficit, you can't be in a 500 or 1,000 calorie deficit for that long. You just can't. Your metabolism's going to slow down and it's going to be counterproductive. So the way that I explain this and the way that I want you guys to think about the metabolism is think about it like a fire. So just like a fire, when it starts to run out of fuel, it starts to sputter and die and it slows down and it consumes less wood, right? It can sustain itself as just an ember or a coal for much longer than it can as a raging inferno. The metabolism's the same way. When you diet too long and you slow your metabolism down to the point where all your hormones are fucked, your thyroid's fucked, and your BMR is way down, and your maintenance calories are super low, you're like an ember. Your metabolism is like a fucking ember, and there's not really any amount of a caloric deficit that we can reasonably put you in that's not below your BMR, that's not going to just fuck you up even worse, that's going to help you lose weight. But when you feed that fire, when you throw sticks into that fire, when you add fuel to the flame, what happens? That fire bursts into a raging inferno, and the more sticks and the more fuel that you add to that fire, the hotter and the faster that fire burns. And that's how we want to treat your metabolism. We want to feed it first so that we can turn it into a raging inferno, and then when it's a raging inferno that's just cooking off energy, then we put you in a caloric deficit. Then you actually lose fucking fat without having to starve yourself. Then you can actually recomposition where you burn fat and build muscle simultaneously. Thank you guys so much for tuning in Tuesday and Thursday every week. We do these little fucking TED Talks. This is metabolic priming. This is my system. This is what we do here in the primal method. And if you want to lose more fat while eating more food, then hit me up. Shoot me a DM on @thebeastwithin9 on Instagram, and let's start that conversation and see what I can do to help. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. You guys have a great fucking day. Ragnar the Warwolf is out.